Welcome back to the Dinner Party Show. I'm Christopher Rice.
And I'm Eric Shaw Quinn.
And my mother, Ann Rice, our guest this evening, has just announced that her next book will, in fact, be about the Loch Ness Monster. Our not report be damned. A sensitive, soulful Loch Nessie.
Right.
No, the new book is called Prince Lestat.
So guess who's in it?
Lestat is actually not in it. She also announced that earlier. No, but is it Prince
He's definitely
Lestat?
in it.
All about Lestat.
October 28th, you will also be returning to the Vampire Lestat Ball in New Orleans.
I will.
We have a question from Sue Quiros. She wants to know if she can call it the Lestat Coronation Ball.
Oh, that's brilliant.
brilliant.
And that she will have his coronation.
That is brilliant. That is absolutely wonderful. Sue, that is great. That
Right?
is just great. But will there really be a coronation ceremony? And can Christopher put on a blonde
Whoa,
wig?
whoa, lady. Whoa. I'm committed to the brand, but let's not go crazy. This hair hasn't been blonde for years. Yeah,
well, we'll get you a beautiful one.
I'm almost 40. I'm turning 36 this week. I can't. I'm too
he's-
old to play Lestat.
He's
really.
250 years old. Don't worry about it.
He hasn't aged a day since he was
Well,
turned into a
Okay,
vampire.
so which is it?
Whatever. Whatever Sue Q wants. Whatever Sue Q wants. We'll do it. We'll have a coronation at the ball.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Coronation sounds great. We will have his coronation.
But I think if you're called, you have to serve. And, you have to serve. Now
Story of my life.
The
in
vampire
Rice
draft.
household.
let me tell you a story about how things could be worse.
Okay, I'm ready.
Frances Hogston Burnett wrote Little Lord Fauntleroy, and her poor little son got photographed as Little Lord Fauntleroy, and he never lived it down.
I know, right? And he looked like me. He was he had blonde, well, I used to have blonde hair, but he had a blonde page boy cut, and I remember his illustrated face was on the cover of the book.
7.5 feet tall?
No, am I 7.5 feet tall? I'll take it. I'll just take it.
No, I
I'll
just
be
happened to read
7.5
that
feet tall.
the other night. But I'm just so
Your
happy
telltales.
that we can talk about the book at last.
Finally.
I am,
Right.
and I should say, the only books I didn't hook into with this were the hybrid books, Merrick, Blackwood Farm, and Blood Canticle. And I didn't try to hook into those books and some of those Mayfair characters because I had never been sure that those books really worked for me. They were very successful for a lot of
And
people.
great fun.
And they were very much not successful for some other people. But myself, I wasn't that comfortable with mixing the Mayfair Witches and the vampires, so I didn't try to hook in to some of the characters in those books. But other than that, I hope this gives a really comprehensive picture of where all the main characters of the
all of
Chronicles
them.
have
All of
been
them.
and
Yeah.
what they've been doing and what's happened to them and how they come together at this moment in time.
But I mean, that's really the question we're getting over and over again on the page is which vampires are coming back. And the answer that I have from having read the book is all of them, pretty much.
Yes, except I would say whoever was in those hybrid books specifically. I just didn't want to go there, and that was a creative choice and an aesthetic choice and an emotional choice.
Dan DeRemus, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, would like to know if Lestat will have a podcast.
A podcast.
A podcast. There is a vampire radio show
There
in the
is.
book.
There is a radio
I wonder
show.
where she got that idea.
No telling.
That Anne Rice. I swear
know,
to God.
isn't that wild? No, that's a very interesting question. I would say, he's going to have podcasts. I mean, that's part of the book. Media, radio, communications is part of the book.
It is
Yeah.
very
But
updated.
we don't want to tell too much.
No.
But I don't think that's telling too much, but I enjoyed that part in the early part of the book the most, updating how vampires are dealt with. We have another question. Courtney Bentley would like to know how Lestat's going to handle a smartphone, and that is dealt with in this book as well.
He's as clueless as I am when it comes to tech, and he explains that his preternatural intelligence works beautifully to learn everything about an iPhone, and then he forgets it within days. He can't, or nights, and he can't remember how to phone anybody.
But his hair grows back beautifully.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I finally have come to terms with that vampire intelligence is an enhancement of human intelligence, and if you don't have an aptitude for science, you're not going to get it
Well,
as
it's
a
sort
vampire.
of like, even as a human being, after a certain point in time, there's some technology that's just never going to be available to you, right?
I
People a
guess,
few
yeah.
years older than me couldn't ever get the flashing 12 to go away from their VHS. And
Yeah.
people my age can't quite do the things. My nephew is like,
Yes.
does amazing stuff with computers that I'm like,
Yes.
really? You're 12? How is that
I
even
know.
possible?
Everybody should have a 12-year-old to help them with
It's like
everything.
a generational
Yeah.
thing, but because vampires span so many generations, it was a really interesting choice in the book because it is very much, it happens like today, and the whole book is set, and
There's a
you very
lot
much
about
address
technology.
yourself
Yeah.
to the current, where we are communication-wise in terms of
Right.
all sorts of current electronics and media and everything else, and how that would impact people who are so broad-based, if you will.
Exactly. And then there is introduced right at the very beginning, there is a vampire radio station, internet radio station broadcasting out of New York, and it's run by Benji Mahmood. And Benji is one of the characters from the Vampire Romand. Benji and Sibel, these two young vampires, were inducted in that book.
To all of the books.
Benji is the one running the radio station, and he is 12 years old when he's made a vampire, and he's a Bedouin, and he's a very flexible international type of little 12-year-old when he becomes a vampire. So naturally, he's the one to think of the technological leap forward.
Speaking of technology, we do want to say for our listeners, we have such a high volume of listeners that some people are experiencing trouble with our media player. We do have free mobile apps that you can download through the website, and we will be replaying this broadcast all week long continuously, and there will be a free podcast up tomorrow. So if we're flickering for you tonight, we will be up and rolling in just another hour for everyone.
And it is often helpful, we're told, to close the website and reopen it, and sometimes that will get your connection back up and running if you're having. Sorry to hear people are having that.
Just a few people are having trouble. Todd Barcelow over in the Philippines has joined us. I don't know what time it is for him currently, but he's a loyal listener to the show. And just a little
flicker. They have that.
I don't think
daylight savings.
I don't know, but I don't think we've ever had this number of people listen to one of our live broadcasts. So I think that is a record, and I'm very, very happy.
Very excited.
Very, very happy.
I'm very happy.
And we
people care.
We can continue with the pose that you had to beg us to let you on here to make the announcement. But we sort of said, if you don't make the announcement exclusive on the Dinner Party Show, there will be consequences.
We'll talk about it.
There will be 2 empty chairs at the table at Christmas time.
You just put a little subtle pressure, like the dissolution of the family as we know.
All that remains. I will scatter the coven.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to announce it on the show. You give me an opportunity to actually talk about it. That's great.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
I want to do that.
Yeah, it is great as an author to be able to talk about it, because it's all in your head until you talk with somebody else who's read the book. It's kind of freeing to be able to. And God, these characters were so real for me. I can literally talk about them like family I saw, or people I spent time with while we were, in another room.
Well, there's no other character I've ever written about who's as real to me as Lestat. He really is out there, apart from me. I mean, I will see him. I know I'm imagining it when I see him. I don't go, my God, there he is.
Oh my God, it's him.
I'm projecting the image, but really, I walk into a hotel lobby and I think, boy, Lestat would love this place.
He's who everybody sees, right? Even the other authors. It wasn't that Lestat in that Entertainment Weekly thing that Lestat was the vampire that they all picked as the #1 vampire.
You can be too modest to say this, but everyone else will say it for you. You forever changed the vampire genre. You took us into their heads and you took us into their souls, and nobody had done that up until you. It had all been horror. And I don't mean that. I don't say horror disparagingly. My last novel was a horror novel, but it was a different exploration. The vampire was a pure source of evil and malevolence. Even in good books like Salem's Lot, that was the role of the vampire, and you turned them into the outsider and the outcast. And as we were saying to Armistead Maupin, when he was on the show a few years ago, you told a story in which characters found ways to love and care for each other outside of very traditional conservative Christian frameworks.
Definitely.
They found other ways to support and love one another. And I think that's what I saw at the ball in New Orleans this past year, was this great sense of community among people who don't feel like they've always belonged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved being back at the Vampire Ball last October. I mean, it was a great thrill. Sue Quiros has kept us going all these years. She and a number of other people in New Orleans. And it was wonderful to go back there and see all those people gathered together wearing their incredible costumes. Costumes made with love. Not just
right.
care, costumes made with love. And I just was so glad to see it, and so glad to see that kind of honoring of the imagination and the bonds that unite us as people who celebrate the imagination and the worlds we can create and sustain in our imagination. The paracosm. That is the Vampire Chronicles. You know what the word paracosm, have you heard?
No, I don't know that word. That's new.
I just discovered that word recently. And paracosm
Definitely a good triple word score for.
It's a name for the dream world some children make when they're very young. And I was one of the children who created a paracosm that has lasted my whole life of dream world characters. And there is such a world in my head, and I'm in it every day, and it's not in any of my novels. Paracosm is the name for that. But the Vampire Chronicles are also a paracosm. They're a whole imagination imaginary
Like
world.
a shared one, yeah.
Yeah, that began to spin out of me with the first book, and then on and on and on and on and on. And I can sink into that world and live in that world. And when I stepped into the ball again in New Orleans, I saw people who shared the paracosm. I mean, that's how I felt.
You were all in it together.
Yeah, and have their own paracosms. And, you know, I've recognized...
sure. This was just the point of
commonality.
intersection, like a Venn diagram where all the different paracosms overlap at this one point.
Exactly. You know, people have asked me in interviews over the years, well, what is it about goths? What do they want? Who are they? What? And I never can really explain it, but I certainly saw it at the ball. We share some kind of love of being able to define ourselves in terms of beauty and goodness, and not necessarily subscribing to anybody else's definition of what that is. It's a kind of a reaching for, how shall I put it, a reaching for the privilege of being ourselves, of being romantic in the way we want to be romantic, of demanding a kind of beauty for ourselves, no matter really what we look like or where we come from or how many people have told us that we're no good and we're going to go to hell.
And not letting anybody tell us what that beauty is.
Right,
yes,
right.
absolutely.
Exactly.
It's my definition, and I don't need yours. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Mocha Pennington would like to know how many pages the book is going to be.
well, in manuscript it was about 630, but I can tell you that probably will print out to a book of maybe 450 pages. I mean, this is not as big as some of the other books. This is more, I would say,
still nice. It's a good
strong size of book, but it's not a giant book. It's bigger than Interview with the Vampire. It's
say,
longer,
yeah.
and it's also a book with a lot of characters and a lot of stories, so it probably is going to feel bigger than it actually is in terms of pages. It's a lot like The Queen of the Damned in that regard. It's all these people, where have they been, where are they coming from, and they're all converging on one issue, basically.
Yes.
And it is no finale. I can say that having read it. It is a launch. It is a launch.
Well,
it is open-ended, and
it's
like, things are already planned by the ending of it.
Oh,
It's-
I've already signed the contract with Knopf for the second
oh, great.
For the
novel
second.
after this vampire novel, and I've got all this material that I just couldn't get into this one, you know, and it just continues the story of my poor Brat Prince, who's, you know, and his adventures in the modern world. But
Yes,
it's a
poor
lot of fun.
Lestat. He's had such a hard time.
It is a lot
Yes.
of fun. A lot of fun.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is really. It was one of those books where it took me forever to read it because I think I didn't want it to be over
Eric,
with.
it takes you forever to read
I'm
every
a really
book.
Eric is a really slow reader.
I've waited
I
and
am.
waited on every single manuscript I've ever slipped in.
I know.
I'm such a pokey
I
reader.
told her, I said I was on my latest novel, The Vines, which I just turned into my agent. I said, well, I'm waiting for Eric's feedback. And Mom goes, well, you'll be waiting a really long time because he's got a lot of TV he's got to cover.
No, it's not that. When I'm reading friends' books, I always want to give it my full attention, and I'm just a really slow reader. I don't know if I am dyslexic, but there's something.
No,
Like,
I'm a slow reader.
I'm not. I'm a pokey, lip-moving, read aloud
Yes.
almost kind of reader,
I
and so
do
it
the same
takes
thing,
a
yeah.
very long time. And so for those two things,
Yes.
that desire to give it my complete attention in a
Yes.
very fractured life, and then I'm just a pokey reader. Yeah, it takes me forever.
Well,
But
anyway,
I
you
never
savored it.
want those
Good.
worlds to end. They were
Yes.
I was so delighted to be there with those characters and see those relationships and see some of them sparking back up. I won't say which ones, but I was
Right.
very excited.
Rick Jackson would like to know if you based the Talamasca on a real organization.
Actually, I didn't, but I was inspired to create it by a couple of things I had read about. Actually, the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, I think that's the name of it.
Which became the basis / lawsuit around the Da Vinci Code.
Yes,
Right?
I happened to read that book when it first came out, and they maintained that there was this Priority of Zion, this secret organization that existed for centuries. And I thought, what a neat thing. So I was kind of inspired by that, and I was also inspired by H. Rider Haggard's famous novel, She. There was a guy in there who knew his lineage all the way back to ancient times and had kept all these secrets. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was an organization like that that had been studying the vampires and the witches all these centuries, and it had endured the Dark Ages, and, you know, whatever, and come down to us intact. And that was kind of how the Talamasca was born. And then after that, it was characters. David Talbot, Aaron Leitner, different characters who were Talamasca members and who'd given their whole lives to this scholarship and were very noble.
Excellent.
Very people.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
we're
a-
going to
it's a
take a
fascinating
short break
component.
here, but we're going to, I don't know if a lot of people know this, or I know your fans do, that many years ago Sting wrote a song called Moon Over Bourbon Street, which was
Yeah.
inspired by the Vampire Chronicles, and we're going to play a short clip from it here, and then we'll be back with Anne Rice and more talk about her exclusive announcement. The new novel is called Prince Lestat. It goes on sale October 28th, and yes, it does star the Brat Prince
And
himself.
advance sales start next Sunday.
Next Sunday, March 16th, the pre-order links go up on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and lots of other book sales websites. And we'll be back after this short break.